Well, here we are. It's Monday, and today we're going to be talking about, well, it's going to be part of what we'll talk about is my $200,000 domain purchase mistake. I'm lucky that I have a wife that does not rub this in very often. But yes, I purchased over a $200,000 domain name. It's actually the most expensive domain name that I've ever purchased, and I very much consider it a mistake. So we're going to be talking about that, but we're also going to be talking about like what the heck, like how do you even get to being willing to pay $200,000 for a domain, or $100,000 for a domain, or $50,000 for a domain, or if it seems like a lot to you right now, it might even be, how do you even get to $1,000, $2,000 domain name? How do you come up with these prices? Because if you just rely on your gut, chances are you're going to make mistakes, like I did, except for $200,000. Then I'll share the domain name. We'll talk a little bit more about it here in a bit. So we're going to just kind of look at some of the tools that we see pretty frequently here on the show, and we're going to try to figure out like how we can use those tools to come up with the numbers. Using the tools, the numbers, the exact match searches, the Google data that we look at every single week, but then add on the layer of, can we make money from this using, for example, the local Legion 300, which we talked about way back in week 3. We'll go over some of the bullet points, what the heck that is. But first, say hi in the chat. Let me know you're here. Look forward to hanging out with you over the next hour. Here we go. Domain to profit.
From domain to profit, from a .com to a business idea. Take a domain name, develop an income from domain to profit. We'll show you how. Domain to profit, from domain to profit. Join Drew Walsh and get started right now.
I've not used the button that I just pushed to bring me up with the music still going in a long time, because every time that I ever tried to do it in the past, it didn't work. So excited to be able to push that button and feel like it's actually going to happen. So, hey, Michael, thank you for joining. And yes, what? $200,000? Yes, it's actually more than my house. And I promise you I get a lot more value out of my house than I did out of the domain name. And Lee, thanks for joining us. And let me see. It's hard for me to read it on the small screen. Bogdan, hopefully I said that right. Thanks for joining us. I think it's the first time I've seen your name in chat. Thanks for saying hi and being willing to join us here, as well as the others that are seeing us. This is Domain to Profit, and here we talk about domain names. We're actually going to look during this show at domains that are going to expire this week. So we're actually going to be able to see some of the domains that expire this week. We're going to pick out the ones that you should possibly be interested in. We're going to actually talk about businesses we can put on those domain names, as well as which ones that maybe are going for big money that you probably want to avoid as far as a domain developer. So fun stuff. I love this stuff. Okay, so this is very much out of fun and out of a passion for turning domain names into businesses, and we do this each week. So it's very much a tight-knit community, and we welcome each one of you who decide to join. And if you would, make sure you like this as well as subscribe. So that way YouTube lets other people know that this is cool stuff, because it is. So what we first up we want to do is we want to go out to expireddomains.net. And we kind of dive into looking at the domain names that are available this week. And expireddomains.net, yours will look different. If this is the first time you're seeing this, you can set up a free account, and this will show you can use this to look through expired domain names. And when you're on expired domains, I click on Marketplace Domains, and then I'm going to set up some filters. I'm going to do it really quickly, hopefully. I'm going to get rid of numbers. I'm going to get rid of hyphens, because those bring zero value to anyone other than if you're just doing something for fun, maybe. I'm going to create a filter that gets rid of, I just only want to see English 1 to 3 word domain names. So 1, 2, 3 words. We don't want any, miscellaneous characters or anything in there. If English is not your primary language, you can feel free to adjust accordingly if you develop on other domain names. And then I'm going to change this to look for domain names this week. And then I'm going to go to the additional tab, and I'm only going to look at .com domain names. .com are the foundational domain name of the web, and they allow us to do what it is that we do, which is use domain names to bring authority and validation to the project that we are building. And that's what this is all about. Picking a domain name that brings authority and validation to your project that allows you to get a head start on anyone out there that might be trying to build the same or similar project on a subpar domain name. Domains are really good for that. Okay, so let's see here. So now what we see, this big long list, it's going to be hard to read. I'm going to zoom in here so we can see these are the domains. So feel free to, if you see something on the list that I bypass, shout it out, or here we go, out loud. Shout it out loud, but in text so I can see it. I can give you the reason why we're bypassing it, or we can talk about it. So outloud.com, going to bypass on that. A fun brandable domain name, but not something that has a defined business plan. Tattoo design, not 100% sure how to monetize it, but I'm sure you could maybe sell some clip art. Foodmachine.com, let's see if this domain is actually up over here on GoDaddy Auctions, which is auctions.godaddy.com. Okay, foodmachine.com, 4 days left, and $2 or $210 is what the current auction is on this domain name. So what we typically do here is something called a 3-minute business plan, which follows a little bit of the format which may show up here in a second, which is this over here. We talk about the domain name. We talk about who the audience or the market might be that uses it. We try to come up with a problem that they might have that the domain name can solve, or that we can solve through programming and then put on that domain name. And then maybe some of the unique messages. And you can get that template for this project over here, this PDF. It's free down below. You can grab that if you would like. We don't follow it all that officially anymore, but you certainly can. So here we go. Foodmachine.com. What the heck is a food machine? Well, it sounds like something that certainly exists. It sounds like a pretty good domain name for a vending machine, right? I mean, isn't a vending machine a food machine? In fact, nowadays, vending machines they're more like food machines. Like vending machines, I think of like a pop machine, or you put a dollar in that gives you a candy bar or something. But the machines that are out there nowadays they'll make you a pizza, right? You can choose your toppings, and you can choose what kind of pizza you want, and then it will make the pizza in the food machine. So this is very much a category-defining domain name, at least as far as I think. But what we're going to do is we're going to open up a tab and go to one of the tools that we will use this week and every week, which is I use SEMrush.com. Let me share the screen here, and that is SEMrush.com. This is a paid tool. You do not have to use a paid tool. You are welcome to use it like any tool out there to get similar data. There are a couple others like Ahrefs, Ahrefs.com is another one. I think you get some free searches with that tool as well. So here's what we want to do. Food machine. Let's see if anyone's actually using the terms foodmachine.com currently. Okay, 1.3, so over 1,000 searches, and then $1.80 is what people are paying for a click under that keyword. And then when we're looking down here, let me zoom in a little bit on this. You can see that Food Machine gets exact searches of 1.3 thousand. Then we have all these over here, how to get free food from a vending machine. No. Okay. Let me see, how to get free food from a vending machine. How to make a food machine. Interesting. So a few other things. When I think of food machine, the thought I'm thinking is an actual machine, like a pizza robot vending machine. But I guess food machines seem to food saver machines. So maybe this is more of a available products, a product for sale thing, which I personally avoid products for sale, but it could be an option for that. So you can see here the keyword food saver machine, food sealer machine, food vending machines, food grinder machines. Some reasonable data. Let's see what shows up when we do a Google search for food machine. And the reason why we do an actual Google search is I want to see if there are paid ads targeting that specific keyword. Over here on SEMrush, it shows us that there are people targeting it, but even if they are, the question is, are they actually targeting the keywords we find in that domain name? So are they targeting food machine? Are they using the terms food machine? And it appears that that is not the case. So there are not, at least here where I am, there's ads selling food machines. But you can see here, none of them are mentioning food machines in the actual for sale items. So for the most part, all of that is bad. That's a bad thing. We want to see people targeting the keyword of the domain name and paying money to target it, which we're not necessarily seeing. Let's see if there's any keyword ads down at the bottom. No, in general, this is kind of a bust of a domain, in my opinion. Google is not going to really give you many search engine benefits to it. You can see there's some good content options. And yes, Google is taking foodmachine.com or the keywords food machine, and they are turning it into a product for sale type domain. So if you sell food machine products, then dive into it. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on from that one. So there we go, foodmachine.com. Try to dive down through a few of these. We'll try to get into a few domains that are of interest, and then I'm going to share with you my $200,000 mistake, as well as some domains that I've purchased that have made a lot of money that were less. So you don't have to spend $200K. Kind of recommend you don't. There's plenty of domains out there that are less than $200K that will be able to make some money. So and we don't get to choose what domains show up on this list. So sometimes we get great domains, other times we get to stare at a bunch of weird domains. So let me see, voiceproduction.com. Check that one out just real quick, and then we'll start into let me tell you some of my. I'm going to share with you my biggest mistake, but then I'm also going to share with you some of the top domain purchases that I have made and why I can justify the prices. So voiceproduction.com, is that an actual thing? I wonder, is voice production a thing? I know voice acting is, but production, I'm assuming it is. The question is, does anyone actually use the term voice production? So 210 searches. Nobody's targeting the keyword. So voice production is one of those domain names. This happens a lot. It sounds like it's going to matter. It may matter to a few people, but it's not going to have the industry defining aspect that will validate your project and give you authority. So what do I mean by those? Talk about those each week. How do you gain an advantage? So we own, for example, towing.com. That is my number 2 most expensive domain name I've ever purchased. Put my house in the line, flew out to California. I was a 27, 28-year-old kid, and bought towing.com. And that domain name defines that industry. I had nothing to do with towing as of that point, but what it allowed me to do is call a towing company and say, hey, I'm Drew Wash, I own towing.com, and would you be interested in listing your company on it? And because it's towing.com, it allows people to kind of perk up a little bit and say, okay, what is this again? What are you doing? It creates the validity and the authority for me to be able to come in, create something, and then sell products, services, or in that case, a directory listing on the domain name. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully it defines it a little bit. So we don't get that with voiceproduction.com. So you can see over here, there's not many keywords happening, and $25 is what it's going for. So here's what this domain name is going to be good at for you. This domain would be great if you do voice type work and you need a brand, or it sounds authoritative, but probably not to the people that work in that field. If you work in voice acting or whatever it is that people do in voice, if you call them from voice production, it might sound good, it might not. Who knows? The question is it going to provide you the authority? I would say probably not. So I'm going to pass on voiceproduction.com. But I will also say probably worth a couple $100 just because it doesn't have a home run development opportunity. It could be worth a couple $100, just not for development, which is ideally and primarily what we talk about here, is developing a domain name. Developing it. We have so many of the domains that I've actually even purchased. Some of the highest priced domain names that I've purchased are actually not developed or poorly developed and need to be reworked. It's sad, but domains are made to be developed. They're digital real estate that should be developed. Just like, when I was a kid, I would go by these vacant retail buildings, and I would look into these windows of these giant, vacant retail. I think it was a Kroger store that had shut down or it had moved, and they left in place this giant store that was just vacant. And I'm just sitting here, my imagination would roll, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, they could put a roller skating rink in here. They could put they could do all these different things in this store. Like, my imagination went wild because that vacant real estate was made to be used. They ended up putting a Big Lots into it. But okay. So here's what I want to do. I've left you in suspense enough. You may have actually said this, you may know this domain name. The $200,000 mistake that I've made was for the domain name movingcompany.com. Movingcompany.com. It is developed, and it does make a little bit of money, and we do plan on, working on it. We're not going to let $200 be a mistake forever. Eventually, it will be a successful website, just not yet. So what I want to do is show you how I got fooled into buying movingcompany.com and thinking it was worth $200,000. And realistically, it's not. I bought movingservices.com. I think I got for under $20,000, which Moving Services will compare movingcompany.com with movingservices.com, and you'll see they look very similar. So it's painful, but realistically, what that tells me is I paid probably about $180,000 too much for the domain name. Anybody else made a $180,000 mistake yet? Let my mistake, hopefully we can help my mistake be a lesson to you so you don't have to ever make that mistake. Okay, so let's go here. I'm out to SEMrush, and I'm going to search out movingcompany.com or Moving Company, and we want to see the keyword, what's happening here. And here's why I paid $200,000 for this domain. Look at this, look at the beauty that is this keyword. So 246,000 searches, $14 cost per click. So if you were to blindly type into SEMrush moving company and see these numbers, you could immediately be like, boom, I would pay 200,000 for that domain name all day. It's worth a bunch of money. People are searching for it. I mean, when you see those numbers, do you kind of go, oh, that's a good domain? Well, I did too. And I had bought towing.com, and it was starting to be successful, and I was starting to make some pretty good money. And that's how I was able to afford movingcompany.com. And I started to think that they got the big head, and I'm thinking, maybe everything I touch, maybe every domain name I touch is going to turn into gold. No, that was a mistake. So let's go back to the screens over here, and we'll start to dive into some of the lessons that I share every single week here, and I've learned them from movingcompany.com. So, for example, you'll see this 246,000 exact match searches here. Each week, I'll show you a lot of times to go down to the keyword variations here and look at this. So here, you'll see that number is actually from movingcompanies.com. So singular and plural domain names share value. Towing is a great domain name because it ends in ing. One of the things I always say is I love ing domain names because they own it. Towing.com owns it. Moving.com would be a fabulous domain name. It owns that industry. And if you want to get value out of movingcompany.com, you have to understand it's going to share its value with movingcompanies.com. And that's the reason why that is Google a lot of times will, if you search for moving company, it's actually going to autocorrect to moving companies, which is why we go over to Google and do a physical search to actually see what is happening and how actual advertisers, those people that are paying like $12 or more per click, like what are they actually saying in their ads? What keywords are they using? So you'll see here of these different sponsors and ads and things that you can't even get to, see normal results on here because Google puts so many ads up here because they're makes sense, right? If you're making $12 per click, you better darn well believe you want to put as many ads up there as possible. So here's, you can see we have 2 Men in the Truck. They're using Moving Company in their actual ad. That's good. That's good for us. We want to see that. But you'll see 50% of them, another company, movingcompanies.com. I'm sorry, using keyword moving companies. So when we go to SEMrush, even the ad, those first 2 ads, we would, if you're going to spend $200,000, you'll want to go into more than just the top 2 ads or top 3 ads. But you can see the keyword moving company is equally, it's dividing the value out between moving company and moving companies. So instantly you can say, okay, 246,000 searches, realistically it's half that at best. And then, you can assume the cost per click is still high. But I mean, if it's half the volume, then is it really going to be worth it or not? So in this case, those are still pretty good numbers. So right now I put the value based on the data, what we've seen, knowing that moving company shares value with moving companies, the singular and the plural share. I would say that already drops the value down to about 100,000. So let's keep diving into the keywords a little bit. Let's compare and contrast that with moving services, I believe is what I actually own. So again, even with moving services, plural, singular, they're going to share value. People are going to search for both. In this case, it looks like I have the better of the domains. I have moving services, which is what the main keyword is. In that case, moving services. I don't know. What would you search for? Moving service or moving services? Probably services. So this, I love this domain name. It's why I actually bought Moving Services well after I made the mistake for Moving Company, and I paid. Oh, that's right. It was it was under $20,000 that I paid for it. But you can see, as far as wouldn't you rather buy Moving Services for under 20? Like, look at this. Like it's even if you divide the volume in half, you share it with the singular, you still have a high cost per click. By far, Moving Services was the better purchase, and the exact search, which is shared between the singular and the plural. It makes sense. So let's go over to Google. And see if anybody. So again, we have a advertiser that's actually using Moving Services. So they're using the keyword in our domain. Again, here you go. 2 Men in the Truck have it in the text of the domain. So people are using it. It's a good domain name to have for sure. They're using it. And if they're targeting the keyword, then that means there's inherent value to that domain name. So if I call any of these advertisers they are paying to show up for Moving Services when people search for it. They are creating ads that use Moving Services in their ad. Do you see how if I called one of these companies and said, yes, I'm Drew, I'm with movingservices.com, and we would like to feature your company on the site, who would I talk to about that or something? You wouldn't want to do that. You would want to have a better intro than that. But if you mention Moving Services when you call them, they're going to assume you are somebody that knows a little bit of something about advertising a moving company on the internet. You're going to have instant authority, instant validation to what you're trying to do. Now, whether you can close a sale or not, completely different. But does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. I think it does. So I'll take this off for 1 second. I just wanted to check. Does anybody check? Is it Moving Services that we own, or is it Moving Service? It's Moving Services. So it is the plural. And just so you know, it's redirecting over to, I have Moving Services redirecting to movingcompany.com. Just trying to do anything I can to recover my $200,000 domain name. Man, it's painful. So what am I leaving out of this? So singular, I learned the lesson of singular and plural and how they share the value of the domain name. And then I also learned to look at the actual Google results to make sure the advertisers are using my domain name, the keywords from that domain name, in the ads. Those are two extremely important lessons that each week here we've looked at domain names where I've done these two tests, looked on SEMrush for keyword data, and then I've also looked at Google, and we've noticed that there's been occasions where what looks like a great domain name, poof, it's gone, and it's actually not as great of a domain name. We actually saw that with voiceproduction.com. It just wasn't as good a domain name as what it might have seemed when we read through that list. So some pretty good lessons. The other lesson I will mention as far as movingcompany.com, when I purchased it, it ended up having a Google manual action on the domain name. That is a search engine optimization thing. Basically what happened was the person that owned it before me must have done something spammy with it, and Google blacklisted it. They put a manual action. So somebody from Google said, this domain name is not valid, and we had to work to get rid of that manual action. So essentially we bought like a toxic asset to where it was already in the hole once we bought it. It was a mistake for sure. So how do you prevent that? How do you prevent purchasing a domain name that has a manual action? Well, good question. There's no 100% certain way to do that, except for if it's a super expensive domain name. Sometimes you can request like due diligence to be able to look at the Google console, which would show you the manual action, things like that. If you're buying $200,000 domain name, certainly look at doing that unless the domain name stands on its own. I bought towing.com, my number 2 domain name, So movingcompany.com is the most expensive domain name I ever purchased. That was at 200,000. Movingcompany.com paid 175 for, and even if that had a manual action on it, in hindsight, looking back on it now, I would have still paid 175 for it because the domain name is so powerful because it has the ing. So hindsight's 2020. You can get out of a manual action. It's just it takes a long time to do. So yeah, there you go. There you go. That's my big mistake and a few lessons I've learned from it. Hopefully, it helps you prevent doing the same. But let's talk about how you get to the level of, I guess, boldness to be willing to even pay $200,000 for a domain name. When we bought DJs.com, so DJS.com, we bought that domain name a few years back. When we bought it, we were prepared to pay. Hopefully, I'm allowed to say. In fact, I'm going to say this, but we were prepared to pay $230,000. We had financing and everything in place to pay up to $230,000, and we ended up getting it for $130,000. So it didn't take the place of the highest value. So how did we come up with that number specifically? Well, we did the exact same thing. We looked at that industry. We typed in DJs. About 100,000 searches, around $1, and then we also, in this case, because it's a 3-letter domain name, we took into consideration the fact that it's a short domain name that's going to have investor value as well. Luckily, I like it a lot more at 130 than I do 230. Actually, sorry, let me share out the screens just so you can see the data that I was referring to here. So 90,000 searches is the exact for DJs, DJs near me. And then you also can account for the alternate domain names like disc jockey, disc jockeys, 8,000. So the closer you get to the longer version, the lower the price goes or the higher the price goes per click. So we've applied some pretty good lessons from that to the purchase of that. So there we go. Yeah, it's hopefully there's some good lessons. A lot of times I am an advocate for continual learning. I read a lot and I am always learning. And the question kind of comes up with should you go to college or not? And that's a little bit of a weird segue, but would you rather go to college or learn on your own? Well, if you can learn on your own, you're going to pay the cost of tuition in one way or another. In this case, it was a $200,000 year of college. So there you go. Okay, well, let's go back over to expireddomains.net. We'll continue to look down through the list. Cannabismerchants.com. Bad. Missed that one the first time through. So I try to get through about 200 to 400. And last week I think we got through 600 domains. User games? No. So what you'll see on a lot of these, user games, for example, wholesale bikes. That's not bad. Now see, wholesale bikes. Wholesale meaning you buy a lot of them all at once. Bikes. Anybody buy a lot of bikes at once? Probably not. Like it sounds like a great domain name, but in practical case, like it's two words that make sense on their own. If you can buy bikes.com, amazing domain. Wholesale.com, like through the roof domain, put them together and they go away. Like just because you have two great domains together does not do much for you. Sounds like it should be a good domain name, but when you call people, sell bikes or anything, if you say I'm with wholesalebikes.com, well, you better be selling bulk bikes or wholesale bikes. Otherwise, that domain's not going to do much for you. But sounds like such a small market. I want to find something good here. I feel like it's been a while since we've had a domain name that was like a winning a winning business model, especially like even a directory model. How long has it been? I feel like it's been forever. Everybody's renewing their domain names that are uh, great directory type domains. They've been watching the show too much. So why are directory domains, especially what I can? Well, they're fabulous. Why do I think they're fabulous? Why is towing.com great? Why is moving company still probably worth $20,000 to $100,000 or more? If you ever want to buy it from me, I'll sell it to you for less than what I paid. But why is it still worth a lot of money? Well, directory domain names can implement so domain names that have exact match searches, deal with local businesses, and then you can see through like SEMrush, they have exact match searches, but then also the keywords that people are putting in their ads actually match it. Like that's what we showed with movingcompany.com. Well, when we see that, we can assume that if we were to call those companies, they would be interested. There'd be authority and validation, and then we could turn that authority and validation into hopefully a monthly subscription as a company listing in our directory. And we would implement the local Legion 300, which let me go a couple screens down here, see if we find anything. Promote website. Promote website. Sounds close. And rate consulting, current works. Current works could be a good blog or something if anybody wants to show what they're currently working on. Okay. So the question of local Legion 300, let me give you a rundown of what that is. We haven't talked about it in quite some time. Here's the idea of local Legion 300 when paired with a directory type domain name. A directory domain name that is based on location. So for example, movingcompany.com. Here is how I would relaunch movingcompany.com. Good example domain. I would take movingcompany.com and I would try to get one company in each of the cities in the United States that have over 100,000 people in them. Why 100,000? Because it's a real city. It's a big city if it is 100,000 people or more. Well, it just so happens that there are over 300 cities, I think it's around 320 cities in the United States that have a population of over 100,000 people in it. So if you can just find one moving company in each of the top 300 largest cities in the United States to be featured in their own city, just one, you can get your first 300 companies. First 300 companies. So how many calls would you have to make to get 300 sales? Well, probably 30,000 calls or 3,000 calls. A lot of emails, maybe some ads. If you have money, you want to put into advertising. Depends on if you're bootstrapping it and doing the work yourself, or you have money that you want to put into ad campaigns. Charge them some amount of money per month or per year, and let's say you get 300 moving companies. I mean, what's the average move? We've done very small moves in the office that are $500 or more. To move a full house long distance, I can't even imagine. I don't know how much that stuff costs, but I would assume that the average move is between $1,000 to $2,000. A normal size, probably 1 to 2 bedroom apartment or something. So if they're making $1,000 to $2,000 per move, and you are trying to come up with a price to charge a moving company, you would want to make sure that they would easily pay for your service with one move per like year, right? So I would say price it at $495 per year to be the featured moving company in their area. So there you go, 300 times 500. Put myself in a corner. Why can I not do that? Somebody yell out what that is to me, because I'm going to have to go to my computer because I'm too brain dead. 3 times, that's 15 something. So here you go. My brain's not working enough to be able to do the math in my head. Okay. So it's about $150,000. So why do I know that domain name like movingcompany.com is still worth like $100,000 to $150,000? Well, because if you get 300, you implement the 300, the local Legion 300 to get 300 companies at $495 per year. You're talking $150,000 in per year. Per year is the thing. There you go. And I can tell you on towing.com, we have well over 1,000, thousands of towing companies total. You can do this. You can do this. And not to mention the price is more than $495 per month. So, or $495 per year, sorry. So you can turn a domain name, a great domain name, implement the local Legion 300, get your 300 companies paying either a monthly fee or an annual fee, use the validity and authority of the domain name, and voila, you can be looking at 6 figures. Is a lot of work? Yes, it's a freaking ton of work. We're not buying a domain name hoping to get rich. We're buying a domain name because we can put our efforts into it and create a life for ourselves. We can create an income for us and our families. We can put our efforts to work for ourselves. We can build a business, build an enterprise, and just all the great things that happen by creating things. So yeah, here we go. Thank you there, Rafe. Paid a 2-bedroom locally. Oh, $375. What do you got? A couple buddies that helped you out? How many 12 packs did you pay with that too? So there you go. $375. Kind of cute. That's pretty good price. So a 2-bedroom for $375. In that case, $495 would be more than one move per year. But if you call up a moving company and say, hey, for $495 per year, you can be featured in your area, in their head, and you can feed it to them if you want to. If you get one move, you'll pay for it in the course of a year. But per hour. Okay, here we go. He says they were billing $120 per hour, so it was just a quick move, and that's about right. Like $120 to $200 an hour is what I believe a lot of movers charge. So, excellent. Thank you for sharing that experience there. So if you know their hourly rate, $120 to $200, now you're talking about only as long as you get like 2 hours of moving out of this listing on movingcompany.com. Okay, with that said, who's going to partner with me on movingcompany.com? Let's get that site going. I have so many domains like that it's like it ticks me off that they're not developed, not bringing value to the marketplace, and of course making money as well. So okay. So we've shared movingcompany.com is my number 1 domain that I've paid a bunch of money for. Towing.com is number 2. Let me just run. DJs.com was number 3. And then Car Transport is my number 4 domain name. Paid under $100,000 for that one, just under $100,000. And Car Transport, you might say, what? Car Transport? Like, what kind of domain name is that? I work as you watch this, I work in transportation logistics quite a bit, and car transport is an amazing niche. Let me just show you some numbers real quick to kind of show you how I implemented this pricing strategy. So I'm over on SEMrush, just typed in cartransport.com, the exact keywords from the domain name. It's only 27,000 searches, but $4.58 per cost per click. And the key thing is there's a lot of exact keyword searches for car transport. So even though it's 27,000, one of the rules of thumb that I use, and I actually developed it based on this, is to multiply the exact searches like this times the cost per click, and you can see it's about $100,000. If you do that, moving company, of course, was a disaster and showed me that that's a bad idea. But I know car transport well enough to know that this industry, it was worth that easily. And also, singular versus plural. No one says car transports. If they do, it's not many. So car transport doesn't have to share that value with the plural. So it's not car transport or car transports, it's only car transport. Now, if you get down into these secondary domains or keywords like car transport service, yes, car transport services is probably a thing. So hopefully that's a little bit of insight into those domain names as well. Yeah, and those these the old rare cars, they all get, if you need to ship a vehicle long distance, chances are you're going to be using an auto transporter. I love those. If you know those niche industries, like, oh, you can just rock it out. You can rock it out. Like I bought duckcleaners.com from Peter Askew, and he like, I love that. Like, what a great niche. It's local. You develop it into a directory. You apply the local Legion 300, and voila, you have a directory that's able to produce a good amount of monthly income or annual income. And it's a very niche market. Not every area has ducks, I found out. Ducts, D-U-C-T, duct, like duct tape, not duct tape, but duct tape. Anyhow, but the keyword in the exact match and then the cost per click is very good. So hopefully I've talked, let me see. Promises that I'm trying to make today are lessons that I learned from the $200,000 failure, as well as how do I pay as much as what I do for domain names? Like, how do I get to those prices? Am I living up to that in what I've done so far? I think so. Hopefully you believe that what I've told you has provided some wisdom into that. Like, let me go to, I'll drop down to my number 6 domain name. Number 5 was truckrepair.com. I bought that one for just under $1,000. Bartenders.com I bought when we just went down into lockdown, about this time last year. Actually, it was March, so a couple months before now. And I paid $50,000 for it. And there were a lot of people kind of going, $50,000, that's a lot of money to pay for bartenders.com. And using this kind of methodology, exact match, which a single match keyword, I looked at the cost per click, I looked at what advertisers were paying, and I looked at ways to monetize the domain name, because bartenders isn't as clear cut as like a moving company or a towing company. Bartenders are obviously more niche, small. So what I'm thinking is private bartenders, a service where if you need a bartender for your event, how much would they charge for that? Then you can get into applying the local Legion 300, and that's how I can come up with the price of $50,000. Is it local? That is the key. Can you show local services? Are there local services for the domain name? That's why I always steer towards local service-based domain names. If you see them on, an auction, chances are you're bidding against me, because I love them. Let's go back to look at some more domain names. I believe that my experience has brought some good information to you. So my mistakes that my wife proudly holds, she doesn't hold it over my head, but she definitely, she's like, I know what I'm talking about too. Someday I'm going to get Moving Company to make a bunch of money. It's going to be one of my most profitable domain names. And then I'll be able to be like, yeah, it just took me 15 years or something. I don't even know how long ago that was. It was a long time ago. Findbeachhomes.com. So 3-word domain names. If you are looking for a development and you're looking to keep your price of domain name down. So let's say you're not buying in completely into the idea of going for an expensive domain name, which I completely understand. adding words is a way to keep the price down. You probably don't want to go past 3, but if you had to, you could. Find beachhomes.com, super expensive domain name. Find Beach Homes makes perfect sense. And let's check keyword. Find Beach Homes. Plural in this case sounds like it will be the best option. Okay, findbeachhomes.com. Really nothing happening. Did I spell something wrong? Is that how you spell beach? That's how you spell beach. I'm not 100% sure why there's not more people searching for that. Oh, yeah. Well, again, this is why you don't follow your gut. You get into the tools. You look for the keyword data. You do an actual search on Google. Find beach. Oh, that's why. It's because it's people look for houses, not homes. Houses. Okay, so you can see here, boom, beach houses, find beach houses. So again, this is why we look at we take these domain names and we plug them into tools. Yes, it may be worth, it's currently going for $12, ending in about 3 days. Is it worth $12? Probably. Is it worth maybe a couple hundred? Sure. Like you can list, it makes sense. There's not a hidden S, although I don't like double letters. That's one of the things that I try to avoid if at all possible, because this is going to look like Find Beach Homes, and when people are typing it, the ending letter and the first letter sometimes run together, so you'll have a lot of typos in your domain name. It's probably worth a little bit of money, but not enough that I'm wanting to dive into it. Okay, let's see here. And again, if you see one that you love, so hopefully a Find Beach Homes is a no. I'm going to say don't go with that one. We're not seeing the homes is not the word that people are searching for. So when we look at these domain names, for example, Find Beach Homes, if you work in those industries and you're desperate to find a domain name in your industry, then in that case, maybe you take a chance on a domain name like that. So here on Domain to Profit, I like to look for domain names that you can develop even if you don't work in that industry. Even if you are just an entrepreneur, you're just a maker, you're just somebody that's like, hey, I want to start a business, not sure what to do. We look at these domain names and we find one that like represents something we can create, and then we just make it. We just create it. And then we profit from it. Take a domain and profit from it. Domain to Profit. Good name for a show. Okay. I crack myself up. Man, I feel like we're really not seeing many good domains this week, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. I mean, that's good. People are seeing the value of their domains and they're holding on to them. There's plenty of domain names that are available on the aftermarket. So people that are just willing to sell their domains. I'm willing to sell, like everybody's willing to sell domains. If I don't have it developed yet, you better darn well believe I'm willing to sell it to somebody that's going to develop the domain or partner. A lot of people want the domains developed. They just also want to value that real estate. Gosh, it just made me think of something I wanted to do today. I wanted to talk about, and so that maybe this will be next week. I wanted to talk about how a domain name is the vacant real estate. And when you buy real estate here in the United States, there is the price of the land itself, and then there's the price of the land plus the development, plus the house that goes on top of it, and the difference between that. So let's get to the second page. Oh, that sounds horrible. Antique mattress? Like, that sounds disgusting. An antique mattress? Like, yuck. Like, how many people do you want to? I have a mattress that at least 100 people have slept on for 20 years old. Okay. I don't. I'm kind of curious as to how you would develop antiquemattress.com. That sounds. Yeah. Well, I think that about does it. So let's wrap up a couple main points here. Drew made a big mistake paying $200,000 for movingcompany.com. We've learned a few lessons, mainly that plural and singular share value when you're pricing a domain name, as well as to look for Google to see what people are actually using in their ads. If they're using it in the content of their ad, then that domain name and that keyword for that domain name increases the value or keeps the value that we see in the cost per click. So those are some important lessons to learn. Cost me $200,000. I'm passing you on those lessons for free. So, I mentioned over on Twitter. So on Twitter, if you watch the show, please, there's a post under my Twitter, Drew Wash. I want to make sure that I get everybody that watches onto a list. That way I can watch what it is that you're doing as far as tweets and stuff. There's so many, I see so many posts and stuff. I want to make sure that I'm able to concentrate on what it is that you're posting and what it is that you're putting out into the world. So adding you to that list is going to allow me to do that, as well as others that want to follow the list and follow your journey as you take a domain name, hopefully develop it, and hopefully make a bunch of money. So, not a bunch of money. It's not about the money. It's about the livelihood and the opportunity to create something. Huge fan of creation. So, okay, well, yeah, here we go. Leanne saying antique match. Yeah, it's like, what? Like that domain was registered in 1999. That's freaking, like, who? And that means if it's expiring, that means somebody either held it this long or it's been sold and re-registered all this time. Like, antique mattress? Like, what? Like, isn't an antique mattress like a freaking pillowcase with a bunch of straw or something in it? Wouldn't that? Okay. Well, I'm Drew Wash. This has been Domain to Profit. I will be back here next Monday at 3 p.m. Make sure you've liked the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I will see you back here next week. Take care.